What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to this week's installment on The Lake Show, and I really appreciate you all making me a part of your day. So last week, or I think it was 2 weeks ago, either way, I went over the rumors about the college football playoff that's going to eventually, more than likely, be expanded to 24 teams. I don't know if it's inevitable at this point, but it's definitely, I think, with the way things that have been transpiring in college football over the past 2 years, more than likely this 24-team playoff is going to happen, especially with the spring meetings, with all the conferences happening currently and into the next couple weeks. There's a bunch of coaches in the SEC now that are on board with the 24-team model, and we're going to get into all of that. We got a full slate today, and before we do begin, I just have to preface this again, that I give all praise and all glory to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I thank him every single day for allowing me to continue to do this, and I thank all of you guys for being such great, subscribers. I really appreciate everything you guys do. We got a full slate today of college football and some NFL, and without even hesitating anymore, we're going to get started, and I kind of just got into it with the 24-team playoff. So right now the big topic is, will the SEC join in the support with the Big 10 for the 24-team playoff? So anybody who's a diehard college football fan knows that it's the Big 10 and the SEC that make all the big decisions. Those two powerful conferences are the ones that they run the show. They run the show in college football. The NCAA can say they probably run it, but they really don't. The playoff committee says they can probably say they run it, but they don't. Everybody who watches college football, everybody who has been a part of college football in any capacity knows that it's the Big 10 and the SEC and then everybody else when it comes to the conferences and the powers that be at hand. So everybody knows that. Here's the idea of it. If the Big 10 and the SEC don't follow suit and agree with something with each other, that said thing is not going to happen. The Big 10 and the SEC agreed years ago that they were going to explain to a 12-team playoff model. That is the first domino to fall. But it's also the fact that the other two Power 4 conferences, the Big 12 and the ACC, followed suit, signing away basically not saying they're lesser of a conference, but basically saying that without saying that. When they notably signed over those rights to the SEC and the Big 10, so they are basically the sole and big decision makers in college football. And I think it's more so college football than it is any other collegiate athletics. So right now, the big arguing question is, will the SEC end up getting on board with the Big 10 in agreeing to a 24-team playoff expansion? Now, last week I talked about it, and I think it's a terrible idea. I think it's one of the worst decisions that could be made for college football at this moment in time, because there's already enough turmoil and chaos when it comes to NIL, tampering with coaches and players, the playoff selection committee itself. There's a lot of issues already surrounding college football. Now, granted, college football is in a better position than it's been in decades. I shouldn't even say decades, but in years, we arguably had the best season of college football just last year. College football is in such a good place, but I think those diehard fans, like myself included, and other people I watch, like Josh Pate, which I want to do an episode one day with Josh Pate. That would be so much fun to have him on my show. I want to pick his brain. That dude's, he's an encyclopedia of college football knowledge. Like him, Joel Klatt, those guys, I just want to be able to sit in a room and interview them one day. Just what makes them tick, what makes them grind out those kind of episodes. But I was watching Joel Klatt recently, actually this past morning, that I was watching him talking about, it's not necessarily a matter of time SEC will join, it's if they will join. But like he was saying, Greg Sankey, the commissioner for the SEC, he has a bunch of bosses too. He may be the oversight of an entire Power 4 conference, probably you can make the argument, the most powerful conference in the college football powers that be. Well, Greg Sankey has bosses too. It's called all the university presidents and athletic directors and coaches. Like, all those university presidents are basically his boss. And the second that they start jumping ship to, rally to the support of the Big Ten in this 2014 model, well, Greg Sankey at that point is left with his hands tied because he's going to have no other option. If he doesn't want to follow suit, well, obviously, I'm pretty sure whatever it is, I'm pretty sure the SEC would have a board of directors at that point. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not that in tune with how the power structure of a conference is, but, Greg Sankey has bosses. That's university presidents. Maybe it's university athletic directors, whatever it may be. Eventually, he could probably be voted out of office, technical term, if he doesn't follow suit. Okay, you don't want to follow our lead and want to join this rally for a 2014 playoff? Well, then we'll just replace you with a commissioner that will follow suit with us. So you have a bunch of high-profile coaches in the SEC already openly expressing their, support for a 2014 expansion, namely Kirby Smart, head coach of Georgia, arguably the best college football team over the past 5 to 6 years. He came out in full-fledged support of the 2014 playoff. Now, I, as a college football consumer, think this is bad. A lot of fans of college football don't even want this at hand. But the powers that be, as much as they don't want it, they won't come out and directly say it. It's about money. It's about finances. It's about revenue. That's the obvious point. But recently, it was the Big 12 and the ACC that, they followed suit, like wanting to expand the playoff to 24 teams. They're following the Big 10. But again, the Big 12 and the ACC basically signed away those, rights of decision-making to the Big 10 and the SEC. So if the Big 10 and the SEC are not on the same page, guess what? That expansion's not going to happen. And at least for the foreseeable future, it's basically a coin flip at this point, because if enough support from the SEC starts to pick up, coaches and university presidents, it doesn't matter how many teams, the more support for it, the more Greg Sankey is going to be sweating about this, because eventually he's going to have to make a decision to cave in or basically probably be forced to step down from the SEC. Now, I don't necessarily believe that'll happen. I think Greg Sankey has done good for the SEC, for their brand, for their conference, but I think it's only a matter of time, just based off the way things are going, that the SEC will follow suit with the Big Ten. So let's picture a 2014 playoff model. Recently, I think it was either ESPN or Fox said that if a 2014 playoff was it from inception, since the playoff started, there'd be like 80 different teams that would make the college football playoff. Name teams like Northwestern, teams like Army, Navy, As much as I'm a fan of just more meaningful games, Joel Klatt said it best. I think it was a year ago or almost half a year ago, where he laid out an entire, incentive-based model. It's a 14-team playoff model that he came up with. 4 guaranteed from the SEC and Big 10. So then there's your top 8. And then 2 guaranteed from Big 12 and 2 guaranteed from the ACC. And then 2 at large, like Notre Dame or a group of 5 team, like a UNLV or a Boise State or even Tulane or James Madison, like we had this past year in the college football playoff. But you will never get the ACC and the Big 12 to admit that they are a lesser conference than the Big 10 and the SEC, even though we all know that that's the truth. They are a lesser conference. The Big 10 has owned college football over the past 3 years. They've won the past 3 national championship games. Ohio State, Michigan, and Indiana. They've owned college football. Now, SEC is still up there because they consistently put playoff teams in and year out. And the ACC and Big 12, well, it's just it's just the unfortunate reality of the teams that you have in your conference. Right now, the Big 12 has a couple teams, mainly Texas Tech and, Utah, BYU. How many of those teams would you take to win over a top-tier SEC school or a top-tier Big 10 school? I mean, we saw what happened when Texas Tech went up against Oregon. They couldn't do anything. And Oregon got absolutely demolished by Indiana in the semifinal games. So, how really good is the Big 12 compared to the ACC compared to the SEC or the Big 10? Now, in the ACC, it's a little bit different. You just had a team in Miami make the national championship game and come within a drive of beating the Indiana Hoosiers. So the ACC has more, I would say, of, more of a foot above the Big 12 in the aspect of they have Miami. Even though they're not good right now, they still have Florida State. They have Clemson, who Clemson more than likely will bounce back this year. But again, the ACC and Big 12, they signed those rights away years ago, where the powers that be, the Big 10 and the SEC, are the decision makers of college football. So as time goes on, I think we're going to see more and more support from coaches in the SEC and athletic directors and university presidents in the SEC, all calling for the expansion to a 24-team model. I personally think an expansion to 14 teams would be good. You could keep, 24-team playoff, you're eliminating conference championships, which I get, and I think I'm trying to hold on a little bit too much to what old college football used to be like, but you can still have all those great moments. You can have all the conference championship games. You can have all the bowl games that you need. You could still keep all those intact and make it great without, eliminating any of it. So the 24-team playoff model, I personally think it's inevitable. At least, maybe not next year. Like, I'm not saying this upcoming season, but the following year. I don't think it would be the following year, but possibly the year after, where the 24-team playoff would possibly be implemented. I don't think it's necessarily a good thing. But am I still going to watch college football? Absolutely. And that's probably what they're counting on. People will still tune in and watch the games, and, more, who knows? Maybe we're blowing this out of proportion. The 4-team model playoff was good. This 12-team iteration, for the larger part, it's been good. Couple controversies here and there, but overall, it's been a success. So, is it possible the 24-team playoff model could be a success? Yeah, absolutely. But it's going to feel a little bit different. No conference championships, basically eliminating and degrading bowl season even more, which I think is just terrible to say. But, eventually I think the SEC more than likely is going to jump ship and get on board with the Big 10, because the Big 12, the ACC, they're already on board. They're outwardly showing their support for a 24-team model. So I think it's only a matter of time until the SEC jumps ship completely and we end up getting a 24-team college football playoff. All right, now we're going to stick in college football. I want to talk about some notable games in two of the biggest weeks of this upcoming year in college football. So Week 2 and Week 10 of the college football season this year is going to be nothing short of amazing. I'm personally making sure I'm going to be off work. I'm making sure that there's no other plans being made with me or anybody. I'm kidding. I love you, Emily. My fiance is going to see that part and basically smack me. But I'm talking about notable games in Week 2 right now. Week 2 is phenomenal. There's a 4-game slate right there, that, among others, but these are like the 4 main games that I'm paying attention to for Week 2 of the college football season. We got Oklahoma and at Michigan. Again, 2 teams with college football playoff hopes and aspirations. More so Oklahoma than Michigan. Oklahoma coming off of a college football playoff berth, but losing to Alabama in the first round after blowing a 17-0 lead, losing 31-17, I think the final was. So last year, the big story was John Mateer, quarterback for Oklahoma. He had Heisman aspirations. He was looking like an all-pro at the quarterback position, but then he gets hurt with his throwing hand, so he rushes back, and then Oklahoma wasn't necessarily the same team after Mateer got hurt, especially after that Texas game in the Red River rivalry. Mateer was just exposed. Like, you knew that he was injured that entire time. You knew that he probably rushed too quickly to come back and play. So Oklahoma at Michigan, I think, is a fascinating one. Two great stories. Oklahoma, obviously, with Brent Venables coming back to make another college football playoff run, and this time make a deeper run and possibly compete for the SEC in the same breath. And then you got Michigan. Kyle Whittingham coming in from Utah, his first season at Michigan. And what is Bryce Underwood going to look like this year? Is he going to progress? Is he going to regress? We don't know yet. And I think those are very important questions that are going to be answered in week 2. I really can't wait for that. I probably would take Oklahoma to win. I know that Oklahoma beat Michigan last year in Oklahoma, but it was more so of a defensive, showcase. Even though Oklahoma's offense put up some big numbers, I really think the story of that game was the defense for Oklahoma basically stuffing Michigan to the brim. Oklahoma, if there's one thing that they need to work on, they need a consistent run game this upcoming year. Possibly they've solved that. I do not know. We'll have to wait and see. It's way too early for any, definitives or anything of the nature. But, there still are questions to be asked. For Michigan, Kyle Whittingham in his first season as the Michigan head coach. We'll see how he does, and we'll see how Bryce Underwood either excels at the quarterback position or if he regresses a little bit. I think he'll do good. I think Underwood needs to utilize his legs a little bit more because he's a heck of an athlete. Absolutely great athlete, and he's a great thrower of the football. I think he just needs to hone in those skills a little bit. All right, another notable matchup. The Ohio State Buckeyes traveling to Arch Manning in Texas. Again, 2 college football playoff hopefuls, and right now I think Texas and Ohio State are up there with some of the highest odds to make the national championship game or win the national championship. Ohio State, certainly. I do believe Ohio State's either 1 or 2 in the odds right now to win the college football playoff national championship. But last year we saw Ohio State. It was a dogfight, not even it wasn't a shootout. It was a defensive battle where Ohio State won 14-7. That was Arch Manning's that was his first season as a full-time starter. So we saw Ohio State and their defense expose Texas, but I think the way Arch Manning ended the season last year, the way Texas ended the season last year, I think that they're going to be primed and ready for an SEC championship run and a college football playoff berth and possibly national title contenders. When you look at Ohio State, yeah, all that talent is leaving for the NFL. So much talent, but you still have Julian Sayin, his second year as a starter. You got Jeremiah Smith, without a doubt, the best wide receiver in college football. I think Ohio State is going to be primed and ready for another run. They came up short last year against Indiana in the Big 10 and then Miami in the playoff. I think that this is more than likely going to be the best matchup of the weekend, and I probably would take Texas in this sense because that place is loud and that place is going to be rocking. I think Texas finds a way to beat Ohio State this time around. And in this rematch of 2025, I think the Texas Longhorns will take it. Other notable matchups. We got Arizona State traveling to Kyle Field at Texas A&M. Now, Texas A&M is another team with playoff aspirations, with SEC championship aspirations. Texas A&M obviously started the season 11-0 and dropped their final 2 to Texas and then to Miami in the college football playoff. If there's one thing that they're coming back for is to show everybody that last season wasn't a fluke. Now, talk about a team that has had so many high aspirations year in and year out and just consistently has failed to meet those expectations year in and year out. That's Texas A&M. But I think Mike Elko is doing something great down in Texas A&M. Marcel Reed is coming back. Now, I know they lost Cassius Howell to the draft. They lost Casey Concepcion to the draft. They do still have Mario Craver, which is a stud receiver. So I don't think Arizona State's going to do much this upcoming year in the Big 12, especially since Sam Leavitt left Arizona State to go and join LSU and Lane Kiffin. So I'd probably take Texas A&M in a handle, like to absolutely manhandle Arizona State, but I could be wrong. Arizona State, without Sam Leavitt, I believe last year, upset Texas Tech and handed Texas Tech their only loss before Oregon in the Orange Bowl. So I think Texas, who knows? Arizona State could give them a run for their money, but I would still take Texas A&M at Kyle Field. And one last notable matchup of week 2, we have the Oregon Ducks going on the road to Oklahoma State. That's such a fascinating matchup. I don't know if I've ever heard of these two teams playing, but give me the Ducks. Oregon has probably the deepest roster this year in college football. If there's a put up or shut up kind of year, I think it's Oregon this year. Dan Lanning, I don't think he'll be on the hot seat. I think Dan Lanning's going to be there for a while, but there is something to prove for Dan Lanning. He won the Big Ten in his first year in the Big Ten 2 years ago, before getting smoked by Ohio State in the quarterfinal in the college football playoff in the Rose Bowl. And then last year, not making the Big Ten title game, making it to the college football playoff semifinals, and then absolutely getting the doors broken off them by Indiana. Was not close whatsoever. So I think Oregon's coming back with something to prove. Dante Moore is looked at as a early on Heisman favorite, possibly, and Oregon is in a prime position to compete for a national title. Oregon's an elite program, Oregon's an elite team, and I think Oregon will follow suit. And Oklahoma State, I believe their new quarterback is Drew Mestemaker from North Texas, who led college football in passing yards last year. You know, Drew, he's a gunslinger. He just loves to throw the football around. So Oklahoma State definitely is better with him at quarterback. But how much better against the team like the Ducks, I'm not entirely sure. So I would take Oregon to win this game. All right, let's move on to other notable matchups in a later in the season, and that's Week 10. Week 10 of college football should be circled on everybody's calendars because we got so many prime spotlight games, and all of them pretty much have college football playoff implications and conference championship implications. First one we're talking about is Alabama going on the road to LSU. Now, LSU, first year with Lane Kiffin, which Lane Kiffin brought coach Ed Orgeron back, which I thought was pretty fascinating and pretty funny. Ed Orgeron's the one who won a national title with LSU back in 2019. So I think that's going to be a fascinating duo pairing up back in LSU. But Bama going on the road to LSU, Kalen DeBoer's got I think it's more of a put up or shut up kind of time because these guys are completely his. There's no more leftover of Nick Saban to, hang his hat on. It's completely his team now. There is no rhyme or reason that Alabama shouldn't be competing for a national title year in and year out with the players that they get. But on the road in Death Valley is a big ask, even though I think LSU is going to go 8-4, possibly 9-3. I don't think LSU is making the playoff, and I said I don't think they're making the SEC title game, but they can definitely play spoiler for a team like Alabama who's looking to recapture the SEC and make their claim as still an elite program in college football, which they are. I'm not saying that it would take just this loss to degrade Alabama, but I think Kalen DeBoer is on the hot seat this year. I think he has to make the playoff again, and he has to win a couple playoff games in order to not necessarily keep his job, but to keep all the Alabama faithful away and off of his back, because it has been beyond vocal that Kalen DeBoer is not necessarily the most popular down in Alabama because year one misses the college football playoff in embarrassing fashion. Year two makes the college football playoff but gets absolutely embarrassed by Indiana, the eventual national champions in the Rose Bowl. Indiana did not need to throw the ball. They barely needed to do anything because Alabama could not do anything against Indiana, which, I think it's put up or shut up time for Kalen DeBoer. He's got to prove something. He made the SEC championship last year, but got absolutely demolished by Georgia, manhandled by Georgia. And speaking of Georgia, they're going on the road to Ole Miss. So a rematch of last year's Sugar Bowl, which I think is going to be a phenomenal shootout. As everybody knows, Trinidad Chambliss is back after a whole offseason of just so much turmoil, whether or not he was going to be allowed to come back for another year, whether or not he was going to go to the NFL draft. But Trinidad Chambliss is back for Ole Miss, and I think Ole Miss gets it done. I think Ole Miss goes on another college football playoff run. I don't think they need Lane Kiffin to do such thing. I do think that this more than likely will be Ole Miss's kind of like put up or shut up kind of year to possibly make a national title run just because of the quarterback situation. Who knows who is in the pipeline after Trinidad Chambliss? But I think a rematch of the Sugar Bowl is going to be really, really fascinating. Georgia more than likely is going to win the SEC again or compete for the SEC championship, and more than likely will be a playoff team. Gunnar Stockton's back for his senior year. You got a great running back, Nate Frazier, great defense. Again, can they get a more consistent pass rush from that Georgia D-line? But I would still take Trinidad Chambliss and Ole Miss to beat Georgia. Next, we got the Holy War, as it's called in college football, Brigham Young versus Utah. Now, BYU made the Big 12 championship last year and nearly made the college football playoff. Lost 2 games, and both of those games were to Texas Tech, regular season and Big 12 championship. Now, Bear Bachmeier's back for another year. He was only a freshman last year. I like what BYU's doing. I think Utah losing Kyle Whittingham, new head coach. I forget their new head coach's name, but Utah's still going to be good. They usually are. They're one of the more consistent teams in college football. Consistently 8 to 10 wins every single season. But I think BYU would take this. I think BYU with the Brendan Sorsby situation happening at Texas Tech and Will Hammond having to step in as the full-time starter for Texas Tech, I'm going to take BYU to win this game against Utah, but I've flip-flopped now. I originally picked Texas Tech, but I'm going to be picking BYU to win the Big 12 and make the college football playoff. All right, another game that everybody's circling because it was the talking point for the last month of the college football season last year. Miami and Notre Dame. Yet again, rematch of week 1 of last year. The biggest debate in college football from the end of last year. Who should be in? Miami, Notre Dame. Notre Dame looking lights out, but lost their 2 toughest games. Miami beat Notre Dame, but lost 2 easily winnable games in mid-season. But I believe, even though I'm a Miami homer, the committee did the right thing. The games have to matter. The games you play, if you have comparable resumes and there's a head-to-head qualifier, you have to lean towards the qualifier. Now, if the roles were reversed, I 100% would be ringing that bell for Miami to get in. But I would understand if Notre Dame was put in because they would have beaten Miami. But that's not what happened. So, if anything, this game is going to be definitely circled on everybody's calendar who watches college football. Miami at Notre Dame. Again, Mario Cristobal has built that program into something special. The U has arrived. I think that this is a golden age for Miami football now, especially with the NIL, transfer portal, recruiting. Mario Cristobal has brought this program back from the dead, and you have Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame, still great coach. Notre Dame is the preseason number 1 team in the country. CJ Carr, quarterback for Notre Dame, is the highest is the highest in the Heisman odds right now. Notre Dame's going to be in the playoff next year, and I'm willing to bet Miami is too. This game, playoff implications, yes, because Miami, while they have a soft schedule, they're in a conference. Notre Dame is not in a conference, and this is by far their toughest game on the schedule. And then Notre Dame also plays BYU earlier in the season, so that'll be a fascinating game. But Miami at South Bend playing Notre Dame, a rematch of the who should be in last year's college football season. I think that's going to be a fascinating game, but give me the Hurricanes to take it on the road in South Bend. And then one final game, we got the Oregon Ducks at Ohio State. What more can you ask for? You got two of the top 5 teams in college football going head-to-head. Ohio State looking to reclaim their crown of the Big 10. Oregon looking to reclaim their crown of the Big 10. So it's been a little bit since Ohio State has won the Big 10. I think it was 2019 or 2020 that Ohio State won the Big 10 last. So it's going on 6 years. And Oregon won it their first year joining the Big 10 in general 2 years ago. So I think that's going to be a great matchup. Dante Moore against Julian Sand. That Oregon defense going up against Julian Sand, Jeremiah Smith, and that high-powered Ohio State offense. I think it's going to be a fascinating game and a high-powered game. I don't think you can want much more out of a college football, week. Bama at LSU, Georgia at Ole Miss, BYU, Utah, Miami, Notre Dame, Oregon, Ohio State. That's just lined up week 10 of college football. Everybody better circle that on their calendars because it's going to be a wild one. All right, we're almost done here. We're going to talk. I want to go over just the early Heisman odds. Now, these are on FanDuel as of the morning of May 26th, Tuesday, which today. So the early Heisman favorites, I've mentioned it. CJ Carr is number 1, followed by Arch Manning, Trinidad Chambliss, Julian Sand, and Josh Hoover of Indiana, transfer quarterback from TCU. For Indiana to get back to where they were, Josh Hoover has to avoid being a turnover machine. I don't think Josh Hoover is nearly the quarterback that Fernando Mendoza is. Not in the head, not with decision-making, not even as a talent. But I do think Josh Hoover is a good quarterback, but he's definitely going to have to cut down on the turnovers. At TCU, he was a turnover machine. So him being a top 5 Heisman candidate right now, I'm over guys like Dante Moore, Jeremiah Smith, Darian Mensah, Gunnar Stockton, Sam Levitt, Jaden Maiava, Marcel Reed, Malachi Toney. I get why he's a Heisman favorite right now because of Curt Cignetti and everything that he's done at Indiana and recency bias. I mean, Fernando Mendoza just took the Heisman and won a national title for Indiana, so I can see why the Indiana hype is real. But for the most part, I do agree with this list. If I had to take 3 that I would think will be in New York, it'll be Trinidad Chambliss, Arch Manning, and Darian Mensah, more than likely by season's end. I think that those would be my 3 Heisman favorites. Obviously, way too early Heisman odds right now, but these presented by FanDuel. Well, this episode isn't sponsored by FanDuel, which, FanDuel, if you want to sponsor a video anytime, just shoot me an email. My email is in my bio, so that'd be pretty cool if FanDuel, reached out and sponsored a video. But so those are the early Heisman odds. And I'm going to go over the early Super Bowl odds right now, which, I don't do much NFL until the NFL season starts, but looking at the Super Bowl favorites right now, we got the Rams followed by the Seahawks, Ravens, Bills, Chargers, and Chiefs. The fact that the 49ers are a top 10 Super Bowl favorite over teams like Detroit and Philly and Denver and Houston and Green Bay, I don't know about that because the 49ers are just so old and so brittle. The talent on their roster speaks for itself, but are those guys really going to be healthy the entirety of the year? Christian McCaffrey, injury prone. Brock Purdy's had a couple injuries. George Kittle, injury prone. Brandon Ayuk, injuries. Mike Evans, old, injury prone. Trent Brown. I think it's Trent. Yeah, Trent Brown. injury prone. Like, Bosa, injury prone. Literally, the 49ers roster is like such a stacked roster of talent that's just never healthy. That's just never able to play together. So we'll really see about that. The Rams being the Super Bowl favorites, I think is correct, followed by Seattle. I don't know how Baltimore is up there. I really don't know how Baltimore is so far up there. Baltimore consistently has underachieved over these past couple years. The fact that old man Aaron Rodgers won the AFC North over Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, I think it's just ridiculous. So one final thing before I head out today. So I posted on my IG a little bit ago, a couple days ago. I think it was about a week ago. I posted, send me your NFL hot take or college football hot take, and I'll talk about it on my show. Well, this hot take's from my future brother-in-law. So this hot take is the Steelers' offense will become one of the best with all the new additions this season. Oh my goodness. Pittsburgh has had a bottom 5, like a bottom 10, bottom 5 offense ever since Big Ben retired. Even that last year Big Ben was on the Steelers, he was no good. Even though Pittsburgh did good and made the divisional and won the AFC North, they still got belted by the Browns in the playoffs. And Big Ben was a shell of his former self. So the fact that I guess it's called a hot take for a reason. I can't see a single world where Pittsburgh's offense all of a sudden becomes a top 10 unit. So, one of the best. That's how the question was phrased. One of the best. So, I'm going to assume that means top 10. Because I would say top 10 or even top 8 would be considered the best offenses in the NFL. So, Pittsburgh's offense, I'm pretty sure, was 26th or 28th last year. So all of a sudden, with Mike McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers coming back, Rico Dowdle, who was a 1,000-yard rusher, by the way, in Carolina, which is a crappy franchise, even though they made the playoffs still. You're saying that all these additions... Now, we had a good draft. I don't know if it's enough to swing the pendulum from 28th in the league or bottom 10 in the league, literally to top 10 to top 8 to top 7 in the league. I rank this 9.5 out of 10. Pittsburgh, as much as I love the Steelers, I'm a diehard Steeler fan and I will be to the day I die. Right now, we are allergic to offense. That is the Steeler way. Spend money on defense, which I think for the 5th year in a row, Pittsburgh is going to lead the NFL in defensive spending, while not really spending anything on offense. Our best idea going forward right now, still, is a 42-year-old quarterback who is in his final year. So, fascinating that we're going to witness 2 legends retire as a Steeler. Big Ben and then now Aaron Rodgers is going to finish his career as a Steeler, which is... If you told me 10 years ago that Aaron Rodgers would finish his career as a Steeler, I would have told you you're full of it. I thought Aaron Rodgers would have retired a Packer, but, things took a turn for the worse when it came to that and the way that relationship ended in Green Bay. But, Steelers offense becoming a top 10 unit. Making me reminisce about the Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, Big Ben days, the Killer B era. The fact that they didn't win a Super Bowl is just ridiculous to me. I don't know. From 1 being not crazy at all to 10 being ridiculously outrageous, I put this at a 9.5 out of 10 because that would be something to marvel at if the Steelers offense becomes a top 10 unit in the NFL, which I don't see happening whatsoever. And that's going to wrap it up this week on The Lake Show, everyone. I really appreciate you all making me a part of your day. Be sure to like, subscribe, share with your friends, leave some comments down below. Sorry. I'm your host, Dominic Lako. God bless.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want, and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no, I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted.